Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. Episode number 72, in fact. Episode 72. Hello. Hello and welcome. So you might notice that I'm not as fancily attired as usual. It is so incredibly hot here. Give the professor a break, all right? The world is on fire. I'm dying. All right. So before you're like, why does Adam look like such a slob today? That's why. Because a tweed jacket is so hot. So, you know what? If you don't, you just alt tab. Just look at a picture of me in a suit, and then that's all you have to worry about. So this is episode number 72. This is Office Hours. What is that? What is Office Hours? What's happening? I know. Maybe you don't know. So Office Hours is a tabletop RPG advice show. Every episode, I answer 3 questions that you ask me by way of my website. So if you go to www.adam-koble.com, there's an Office Hours link. You can click that. You can fill out a form. You can, if you feel so inclined, record your voice, which I will play on stream. And then we answer 3 questions. We answer 3 questions every week that we do an episode, and we talk about RPGs. So that's what you're here for, I hope. That's the thing. Today we've got some good questions. I don't answer bad questions. If I had a bad question, I wouldn't. Maybe I would like bring it up and then talk about why it's a Anyway, I'm really excited about today's questions. I think there's some good ones here. And we're gonna start with a simple one that I think is probably the opposite of a problem most people have. Here's our first question from today.
Hey Adam, I've been running tabletop RPGs for about 10 years, and currently I'm running games for Adventure League, as well as some home games. And I was just wondering, how do you introduce someone new to your ongoing tabletop group? Like, how do you deal with your expectations versus what's already been established with the current group? And what's the best way to throw them into the thick of things without overwhelming them? Thanks for answering the question.
So, Dubstep Pibby, which is, I guess, like a regular Pibby, but, like, knows how to party. Dubstep Pibby is concerned about how to introduce new players into an ongoing game. Now, the reason I said that this is sort of the opposite of a lot of questions is that a lot of the time people are like, what do I do about players that don't show up? What do I do about players that are leaving? What do I do about players that are absent from my game in some way? And I think this is a great question because I have to do this a lot. And you've seen, if you've watched Court of Swords, or more recently Far Verona, or really anything. We did this with Tomb. I think most campaigns, at some point, you might lose players, but you're definitely likely to gain players, right? And so how do you do that when you're 20, 40, 100 sessions into a campaign? That's a lot, right? So I think the key thing here, and sort of thinking about how I would do this on a sort of non-specific level, right? Like generally, this is a little bit more of a general question than I prefer, but generally what I would do, the biggest thing would be give them something to do. That's the core thing about adding someone to your game. Right? It's not about fitting them into the story. It's not about like the verisimilitude of a new party member, because God knows we all have to put aside believability to add a new character, right? We don't operate in real life in these little 4-person units where if one person goes away, like if you have 4 friends and one of your friends moves away, you don't immediately go to find another friend to fill that gap and then stop, right? Like the game has a structure of of play. You kind of have to acknowledge and ignore that, right? You kind of have to be like, yeah, okay. So it is a bit weird that we are constantly a group of 4 people and somebody will rotate in and you have that awkward like, well, we can't not be friends with this person or we can't not have them on our team because we need them to be able to play, but you can as a group, and this is where things like immersion and metagaming get in the way of like having a productive game, because if all you want to do is play immersively and avoid making meta decisions, you're going to have several awkward sessions where you're like, well, we don't trust this new guy. Let's like awkwardly like debate whether they're going to be allowed to join the party, or let's be suspicious of them because, we're suspicious, angry murder hobo. Like, that's so boring. So sit down with your players and say, hey, everybody, this is the person who's going to be joining our group. Or, hey, we know we're going to be replacing someone. How can we bend the game to fit them in? Now, some games will include mechanisms for this. If you were playing Apocalypse World and you need to bring someone in, you get to do the hex questions for them. So these are characters who are just kind of already around and who already have history with the new character, or with the new character and with the existing characters, right? That gets built on mechanically. If you're playing a Torchbearer, maybe you write a belief about them or an instinct about them, or you make them part of your goal. If you are writing, if you're playing a game of Burning Wheel, you write a belief about them. You treat them like a new circle, right? But we have to take a step back from the game and as players say, this person is joining our game. What place do they have and how, right? So hopefully you're already playing a game that's going to make that a little easier with its mechanics. But if it's not, you can just sit down and be like, okay, so this isn't just a wizard, right? This is a wizard that someone knows. Who in the party already knows this person's new character, right? Who in the party already has a connection to them? Build in a way to stitch them into the fabric of your campaign. Now, the other side of this, for the new player coming in, it can be really intimidating or intense, right? It can be very intense to be like, hello, welcome to episode 51. It's a special reunion episode to complete a campaign that we did, a year ago, and you're going to jump in and you're going to be in this, and it has this like deep-seated universe and there's all this stuff going on already, and we're going to be referring to things that you've never heard of. So here's a wiki. So read everything about this and figure out exactly how you fit in. Don't do that. That's terrible. That's a terrible, terrible burden to place on a person. Do not let that happen. Invite them into the group. Say, we will make room for you. We will make this easy on you to join. The other players will do what they can do to help bring you in. What kind of character do you want to play? And then I will help you fit into the world, right? Don't say, do you want to be a member of the Red Cloaks Union, or would you like to be a cleric of Borgon the Destroyer, right? Like, don't dump a bunch of setting shit on them. Be like, what kind of character do you want to play? So they might say, I want to play a bookish scientist who has a dark secret. Or they might say, I want to play a loyal cleric who serves the powers of good, but who is suffering a crisis of faith. Invite them to create the themes of their character, and then you help them fill in what works, right? Don't make them make those decisions. If you're playing, and this goes for your campaign, this goes for existing campaign settings, don't expect them to know everything already, because that sucks. That's a lot of pressure, and it's just going to make this problem worse because they're going to come to the table and they might make a mistake, and that can alienate them, right? So if you expect them to know everything about the setting and they come to the table and they're like, well, so my character, I was born in the township of Kubliar, and then someone might be like, well, that's not possible because you're 30, and 30 years ago, Kubliar was in the demiplane of gelatinous orbs, so you couldn't possibly be from there because all the Kublarites are they're part gelatin. So what's up? You obviously don't care about this campaign setting. Don't play with people who are like that in the first place, but like, don't put that pressure on your new player to know and to understand and to be built into the world already. Invite them to play a little bit of like Mad Libs with you. Let them say like, I want to be this kind of thing, this type of character, and then that's it. Don't expect them to fill in the gaps. You do that for them. Because that way, they are only going to care about the things that matter to their character, right? They don't need to know everything. They just need to know the stuff that'll give them context in the world. The other fun thing you can do is let them design something new, right? TV shows do this all the time, right? TV shows do this constantly where they're like, okay, we need to introduce this new character, but let's use this as an opportunity to introduce some new things. So if, for example, your new player is cool with being part gelatinoid from Goobliar, they're welcome to do so, because now you can introduce it. I'm thinking of like in Game of Thrones, we almost always get characters to tie us to a place, right? So when you're like, oh, okay, this season is gonna focus on the lands to the south of our current setting, right? We want to introduce some cool stuff about Dorne. It's not just, the Starks and the Lannisters talking about Dorne. It's like, yo, motherfuckers, there's a boat in the harbor full of Dornishmen. Here's Dorne personified. You should be doing this with your NPCs already, right? You should be doing this with your NPCs by introducing places and themes through characters. I don't care about Bane, the god. I care about how Bane's clerics exist in the world and show me things about Bane, right? I don't care about Calimshan. I don't care about Tithir. I don't care about Waterdeep. I care about people who are from those places and what they bring to the table. This is like basic storytelling stuff. It's real easy. And what you can do is you can sit down, use this as an opportunity to bring in that new stuff for your setting. So what I think is really fun for new players is sit down with them and say, okay, so we've already got characters who are from these places and who are about these things, and that's cool and interesting. But as a GM, I've been really excited about introducing like this new thing. I've got this idea for a culture of half troll, half vampires who are from these sunken castles out in the swamps to the east. We've heard rumors about them, about the trollpires, but maybe that sounds like a cool character for you. Are you interested in that? And maybe they'll be like, yeah, trollpires, that sounds fucking awesome. I will definitely be one of those, and we can work together to figure out what the trollpire marches look like, and then I can be like that NPC in your game. However, they might be like trollpires seems kind of dumb. I like the half vampire thing, but could we be half human, half vampire? But people think of us as trolls because we live in these castle swamps, right? Maybe that's like, let them bend your world a little bit, because that's going to challenge you to doing something different. And I like that as a game master. I hope you do too, right? Where you have these ideas about stuff and you're like, no, it's definitely 100% like this. But then a player says, yeah, but what if it's not like that? What if it isn't? What if it's something different? And then that's going to tie them right into the campaign. And then when you go to the great Trollpyrian swamp, this player is going to be able to it's taking their new players home. It's saying, cool, I'm important to the setting. My character matters. So I would say that the three big things that you want to do is, first, ask them what kinds of thematic stuff they are interested in portraying. Say to them, do you want to play a character who is like tough and cool and detached? Do you want to play a character who is sort of like mousy but with a temper? Like, what sort of character do you want to play? In D&D, this shit is really easy because you don't have to say to them, let's open the player's handbook. Okay, all right, so gnomes in the setting. Here's 20 minutes of me talking about gnomes. Halflings, here's 20 minutes. Humans, let's sit down for 12 hours and I will just describe every race to you. Instead, invite them to look through the player's handbook and be like, what race are you interested in? And they might be like, okay, tell me more about elves and dwarves. And then you can just tell them that. Learn to ask questions. Be like, what do you like about elves? What do you like about dwarves? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, we'll talk about that. So if they're like, I'm interested in dwarves, but what are they like in your setting? You can say, why are you interested? What about dwarves is interesting to you? And then you can learn about that and you can focus on that stuff. You can help them tell the story of dwarves in your setting by bringing their interest to the table. Literally having a player who is hyper excited about literally anything is a gift. The worst sort of player is the player who just doesn't attach to anything, who's just like, I don't know, I don't care, I'm not interested in any of this stuff. If you can get from them even an iota of excitement, if you can just watch their face light up a tiny bit at anything, grab that and be like, yes, okay, cool, we can build around that. Yeah, if you have a player who's like, I'm just really excited about the idea of being a mechanical person who fights with swords, you can be like, awesome, cool, let's find a space for you in the campaign. Let's see if we can explore that. The hardest thing to hear from your GM is when you're like, I am excited about X, and the GM is like, oh, there's no X in this world. It's hard, right? So I'm not saying that you have to say yes to everything. Like if a player comes to the table and they're like, I want to be a unicorn, and you're like, that doesn't really fit tonally with what we're going for, that's when you ask the question, why? Right? You can say, no, you can't be a unicorn, but what is it about unicorns that's interesting to you? What do you like about that? Is it their mythological purity? Is it that you want to be a horseman? What part of, because nobody comes at something saying, I am just universally interested in this thing. And if they do, they need to assess that a little bit harder. So yeah, you just sit down and you just have that conversation with the player and do it in front of all the other players, because they're going to get excited about the other player's excitement. It's okay to put a spotlight out of game and in game, I guess, but on the new player and say, hey, okay, so this is kind of like, this is about you. Let's work this out. Like, what are you interested in? How can I find a place to fit you into our universe? Like, for example, I cannot stand gnomes. I think gnomes are really stupid. I would never play one. I think that they are portrayed really poorly in most fantasy fiction as being like obnoxious, like tiny old men who are tricksters. And I don't like it. I would never play a gnome. However, if a player is excited about being a gnome, I will find ways to get excited about their excitement. That's part of my responsibility, is to be like, okay, well, what about gnomes do you like? What kinds of stuff are you interested in? And to play with that. So anyway, that's a thing you can do, is to feed off their excitement. I would say that's the main thing. Ask them what kinds of themes they're excited about, what kind of stuff makes them excited about those themes, and help them find a place for it. The next thing is, yeah, work with the group to help them fit into the world and the party as players, not as characters. So try to avoid, because the scariest thing is like coming to the table and being like, all right, I have this new character, I'm going to try to fit in this campaign, I'm ready to play with them. Hi everybody, I'm Gorblon, the half slime. I'm from the slime dimension. I'm here because my town was sucked into another dimension, but I managed to escape, and I'm undergoing this terrible curse, and I really need to find some allies who are going to come back with me to help save my town. And then have the other players be like, no, we're not interested in that. That is slamming the brakes as hard as you possibly can on any future progress. It's not fun, it sucks, and it's mean player behavior. Your players should not do that. If you get a character all the way to the table and you are in character, and then that happens, you've already fucked up. You and your players have fucked up, because they should be ready to have excuses to invite this new half slime into the party, right? Because you've talked about it as players first. You've primed that pump so that when the half slime shows up, no, it's not a new information. It's not, oh my gosh, this is, I don't know what to do. I'm so immersed because my character would just respond. It's like, no, you're ready. You know their character concept. You know kind of how they fit into the world. There's still secrets and excitement, but you know you're ready to embrace them as part of the party. You have an in-character excuse. Maybe you already know them. Maybe you want to go back to the half slime town, etc. So I think that's super important. Have excuses. Make it as easy as possible, and then give them something to do. Right? Give them something to care about. Make them important to the campaign. Make them the quest bringer, right? And you see this in basically every guest arc I've ever done, where I'm like, okay, we are going to start this arc based on what the new player wants to do. Everyone else in the party, they are the one giving us our next quest because they care about this thing. We want to tie them to our universe, and it's important for us to be able to bring them into our campaign. So I know that this ultimately just boils down, like so many questions from office hours, to talk to your players. But like, no shit, like obviously work this out as players together. Say, we are introducing a new character. We are introducing a new player. Let's make this fun and easy for them. Give that player some authorial voice. Let them work out some cool stuff in your setting, and then invite them into the party. There's still going to be some like personal stuff, some awkwardness as the new player gets acclimatized to the setting. There'll be those things where they'll introduce something or they'll say something or they'll do something and you'll be like, this seems off tone for what we've done so far. But remember, tone is only controlled by the group at large, right? So someone coming to the table, once you've invited them in, once you've like laid out what's going on, their honest creative input is now as valid as anyone else's honest creative input. So if somebody says at the table, my character has a familiar, and you're like, oh, okay, hang on. This is like a fairly serious sci-fi setting, and there's no magic. How is it possible for you to have a familiar? Don't be like, no, you have a cat. Fuck you. It's not your familiar. Be like, okay, so what does that mean? Why do you think that? How does, like, what? Help me understand what that word means for your character, and then expand that out into the setting. Be like, oh, okay, yeah. Some psychics of House Lyra have like bonded animals that they use to help control their psychic powers. Sure, that sounds great. Done. It is now added to the lore. This thing that you contributed is real. Don't be like, no, that's dumb. Right? If you created a campaign setting thinking, you know what? There are no gnomes. I hate gnomes. Fuck gnomes. Gnomes are really stupid. And then a player says, I would like to be a gnome. Or they roll randomly and they just are a gnome. Don't say, re-roll. Say, okay, all right, I can work with this. Now, again, I'm not saying throw away all of your creative control. The GM still has the ability and the right to say, okay, it's not as written, you can't be an elf. But we could talk about what you like about an elf and maybe find another species that's like that. Or you're a guest star, right? So sure, great. You can be an elf. In Court of Swords, you can be a Farang. Okay, cool. Do you not know that you're a Farang? How does this... Because ultimately this boils down to the fact that PCs are always special, right? If you say to your players, this is a thing that's not in this world, someone will be like, I'm that thing. If you're like, no one's allowed to be an elf, someone will be like, I'm an elf. If you're like, no one can be a warlock, someone's going to be like, I'm a warlock. I know that that's hard, but like find a way to make it work. No rule in the universe is totally unbendable. Right? Don't be that player. Find ways to make exceptions interesting. And remember, players exist to bend and break the rules. PCs are special just by merit of being players. So get excited about that. Be like, that's cool. You're allowed. That's fine. Especially if they're choosing something from a list of things. If they're like, I would like to be a sentient gas cloud. Like, that's design work. So I think you can say no, because you can be like, mechanically, this game does not support you being a sentient gas cloud. In the same way that if somebody says, oh, this is a fantasy role-playing game, I'm a cyborg from the future with laser guns. That's them being disrespectful. That's them being shitty to you. Make sure that they understand the structures of the game. But if they're playing ball, try not to say no. Remember, this is collaborative. Doing this as a group, working together, I think for the most part, if you're playing with people who are not jerks, they're not going to try to troll you and say, I'm going to be something that fucks with your setting. And if they do want to be something that fucks with the setting, hopefully they're doing it because they can bring something interesting or cool to the table. But be firm. Remember, you don't have to say yes and to everything. You can say, no, you can't be a sentient gas cloud. But you could be a sentient gas cloud trapped in human form. Find ways to allow people to contribute. Right? No, you can't be a cyborg. Yeah, you could be a warforged. That's like a cyborg. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of cool things that you can do around this. The idea is to make them as much a part of the group as possible, not make them learn a million bits of lore and then let them fill in. You know, as a parting thought here, the real easy thing to do is make them from somewhere we've never seen, make them from a different time, make them from a different world. Do the thing where they don't know anything about the setting in character and then let them learn. That's like the easiest way to introduce lore. Introduce it to the character, not just to the player.
Hey Adam, lately I've noticed something strange in my gaming group. We tend to get so immersed in the game and in the characters that the drama overflows, details get lost, and most of the action boils down to describing the character's emotional state. It's difficult to keep the sessions eventful with all the psychoanalysis going on. Don't get me wrong, I really like that they are making the characters believable and complex, and I never would have imagined having a problem with this personally. But I think it frustrates other players too, especially the one I've talked to about this. At first I thought the scenes I frame are too dramatic and that the theme of the game might be too much. That's why we tried Masks, a new generation, which should be an easygoing comic book story game. But the problem persists, and now it seems that in-character feelings carry over to personal feelings, which makes things more complicated. The obvious answer is talking to my players about the matter, but I don't know how to tell them how to do good role-playing, only less. It seems like a difficult thing to communicate. Also, I'd appreciate some advice on some techniques I could use to help them take a step back from all the immersion and enjoy the scenes like they would while watching their favorite TV show.
So this is kind of a funny question because it's often the opposite problem that people have where they're like, my players are just playing the game too much and no one is RPing and no one is having a role play and we don't learn anything about the characters. And so Gabor's resistance to say anything here is that I think this is the thing that a lot of GMs dream about. They want this. We want people to think about their characters, to express their character drama, to understand their characters' emotional states, and to play up this high psychodrama. But you can want less of that too. It's okay, Gabor. Like there was a lot of hesitation in this question, and I think it's okay to just like be chill, right? To be like, you know what? Like, y'all, you're diving into this so much that nothing is going on. I've experienced this personally. Like I've been in groups, especially groups that are, I want to say groups that are used to playing games that are like this, that are very character drama focused. They tend to be self-identified story gamers, which is fine, but there's a certain type of player that plays games to be like, yeah, but this is what my character is feeling. And then they feel this, and then they're feeling these things. And then they do this tiny little thing. How does your character feel about that? Which is fine, but it's clear here that at least two people in the group, Gabor and one other player, they're not into that style so much. And I think this bleeds over a little bit into, we talked about this ages and ages ago about stances. That if you want to, you can look at the way that players interact with the game under a variety of stances. So things like pawn stance, where you look at your character as a game piece, or actor stance, where you want to embody your character or director stance, where you take a step back and talk about what your character is thinking and doing based on your greater understanding of the fiction. So there's a lot of different stuff here based on like player style and the way that this kind of play can work. So what it sounds like to me is that Gabor has a group of players who want to both play with one hand and assess with the other. To be like, my character does this, and then my character thinks and feels this about what they're doing. And I think that choosing the right game is really important for this. And what's funny, I think, is that Gabor chose a game thinking they would move away from the drama, but they chose a game that's all about teenage drama. So in that case, that might have been a misfire for Gabor. That is throwing, you're like, oh no, my house is on fire. Let's get this can of gas. Oh, I'll put it out with this gasoline. Why isn't the fire going out? Oh God, it's worse. It's not your fault, Gabor. Maybe the can was labeled water. It's fine. The thing is here, you got to understand what you want out of the game personally and as a group, right? So if you and this other player are having some trouble, you're feeling like scenes are dragging, you feel like there's a lot more psychoanalysis going on than there is a game, I think, yes, like you say, the obvious answer is talking to the players about it, but this is less about what you should do and more about how you should do it. So sit down with your players and say, hey, how are we all feeling about the game? Right? Me and this other player, we were talking, and we're having a little bit of trouble with the pacing of the game, right? We're having fun with some of the psychodrama. We're having fun with some of the like intense stuff, but we would like there to be more action, right? We'd like there to be more going on in our games. How does everybody feel about that? Is that like a reasonable request? Are you all comfortable? Like if there's like 5 people comfortable with the pace and 2 people who are not comfortable with it, you may not be able to sway the group. We've said this a bunch of times. You may just leave. Maybe this isn't the group for you. But they may also be like, oh, you know what? Okay, cool. Like let's try that. We can all agree to try to pull the psychodrama back a little bit and do something new. I think ultimately though, as the GM, you are within your right, depending on the game, to say, okay, but what do you do? That's great, but what do you do? I understand how you feel, but what do you do? Right? How would we know that? If somebody says, I'm going to explain to you my character's motivation for this thing for 10 minutes, you can say, okay, well, don't do that. Don't tell me, show me, right? I'm thinking predominantly about like Apocalypse World, for example. Apocalypse World has moves that allow you to interrogate why someone is thinking or feeling something. And if someone starts to exposit why they are thinking or feeling something, be like, hold on, they didn't make the move, right? Show me what you're doing. Obfuscate your character's feelings through actions. And don't posit it as you're fucking this up. Don't put it to the player as you are failing to roleplay properly. Say, this is a challenge, right? Understand that we would not know what your character is thinking or feeling unless we make those moves or unless we ask. So what I challenge you to do, player, is show me. Don't tell me I'm sad. That's boring. Tell me tears began to well up in my character's eyes when you said that. Tell me my fists balled up around my weapon when you spoke my enemy's name, right? Describe what other characters can see, perceive, hear, feel, like what is real for them. Like right now, the way that I feel, the things that I'm thinking are obfuscated to you, right? Now, you're going to be able to perceive the things that I feel passionate about because my gestures will become more animated, right? My facial expression will change. The tone of my voice will change. I'll speak faster. I'll get louder. You know those things because of what's actually happening. You don't have access to my internal monologue. You can't know what I'm thinking or feeling unless we're playing a game that allows it. And I think, and here's the thing, if you want to exposit this a little bit more to your players, say you're doing the game something of an injustice, right? If I build a character whose whole shtick is around learning what other people think, knowing how to manipulate them, understanding their desires, you are stealing my character's thunder by just giving me that stuff for free. Giving it to everyone else, in fact, right? Like, if everybody in the game hits equally hard, the fighter becomes irrelevant. If everybody always knows everybody else's emotional state, the psychic becomes irrelevant. You're breaking the rules of the game by giving up that information for free. So again, I'm thinking about Apocalypse World. If someone starts giving you the answers to read a person, you should say, whoa, stop. I'm not trying to read you. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what I see. How does your voice change? And if I'm interested in that hook, if I'm like, whoa, wait a second, why is he yelling at me? Why is he shouting? Why is he knocking things off the table? I'm going to try to read this guy. The reason I think that this is important from a game design perspective is I'm thinking about the differences between Apocalypse World and Burning Wheel. In Burning Wheel, there is no way to read a person. That's by design. People are hard to understand in Burning Wheel. Knowing someone's beliefs and instincts gives you a dramatic advantage over them. And you have to guess. You have to guess what their beliefs are. So as an NPC, if I'm describing them, weird behavior might indicate a belief, right? Sudden drive might indicate an instinct. You want to be able to pick that stuff up. And if you're just giving it out for free, the players don't get that satisfaction of figuring each other out. Of being like, oh my God, you're in love with Dremmer. Like, that explains why you've been acting this way. That's great. That's so cool. I think it's fine as players to talk about this stuff. But if it's getting in the way, and if all you're doing is constantly saying, like, I do this, and then here's 10 minutes of why I did that, I think it's okay to say, no, please, like, it's cool that you're giving me your secrets, and that's fun, and that allows us to director stance that stuff together, but if nothing is happening, you can go too far. So as the GM, I would say that you can use your authority to say, okay, I understand, but show me. Show. Stop telling, show. How does that become action? Because role-playing games, when it comes down to it, role-playing games are about motion. They're about momentum. They're about action. They're about what we see and feel through our characters in the world. Now, we can explain and we can analyze that, especially if the game gives us tools, but we want to try not to fall too much into that becoming the game. So think about what your character might perceive. If players want to ask questions, right? If you're like, I get angry and I draw my gun and I shoot the TV, a player might say, why did you do that? That might trigger a move, right? That might be reason to engage the mechanisms. I don't know, make an insight check to find out why I cut that statue in half, right? It's about engaging the game. You're still playing a game. You're still making rolls. Find mechanical ways to step in and say, okay, hold on. How would they know that? What do we see? Do you want them to make an insight check? And when they make that insight check, then you can invite them to exposit. It's a reward to be like, okay, so they failed their insight check. What do you think they pick up on? Lie to them, right? Now, I'm not saying like immersion is the most important thing or like that we should stop freely giving up information, because I think it's still really fun to be like, I love you. I'm lying. I don't, right? But I think that it's important to try to remember that we perceive the world of the game through the rules of the game and through our characters. Those are the two ways that we get at that information. So let the rules do their job, right? Read a person, read a situation. Let the characters understand the world through their own senses, and that's going to enrich the world. It's going to be fun. I think what's happening here is that the players don't want to be misunderstood, right? They want everyone to understand why they're doing the things. They want to be lauded for, wow, that's a really cool and thoughtful way to play your character. But I think that we're doing the game an injustice. We're doing each other an injustice by not letting interpretation step in, right? So if they want an immersive gameplay experience, misinterpretation of character motivation can be really fun. It can lead to conversations like, why did you do that in character, right? And the players are robbing themselves of that fun by being so transparent. So I don't know, talk to them, sit down, try to express how you're feeling. Hell, Gabor, show them this segment of the episode. Hi, people who are playing with Gabor. I think you're doing a good job, but you're alienating your players. You're alienating Gabor and this other player. You're making it hard, and it sounds like nothing is going on in your group. So I hope that this prompts a conversation. I hope you can all sit down and talk about this and figure out a way to make this work for you. That's what I hope. Yeah? Yeah. Misunderstandings are cool. Sometimes having someone not know why you did something can be really fun. Yeah, and as Chad has been pointing out, misunderstandings can be a really fun narrative thing to have come up. So, yeah, director stance is fun, but sometimes we need to take a step back and like let the characters be characters. There's a fine balance, and that balance is going to be different for every group. I hope that you can find one that works for you, Gabor's group. Good luck. Talk about it. Don't play games that encourage drama. Masks is maybe not the right game for this. Try Moldve. Try Moldve D&D. See how they like that. That's a very different game experience.
Hey Adam, prepare for a long one. You like to use the Sorensen-Crane weak test for defining RPGs, but I am always troubled by the first question. Why does a game need to be about something? I feel like it's completely ignoring or downplaying generic RPG systems that I personally like. I've tried contemplating them in my own design of a generic modular system. I don't know what it's about. I want it to be about anything. I just want a generic system that is simple to use and sleeve into any theme. So as I see it, it's about being easy to pick up and learn, and while still providing randomization and mechanical structure, is in and out of your face as quickly as possible. Am I missing something?
So, Saber Runner is asking about the 3 questions. Now, I use these 3 questions to assess and understand role-playing games. You may or may not find them useful, but these are the questions, and I do not. Well, let's talk about it. So the big 3 questions are: 1, what is your game about? 2, how does your game do this, or how is it about that? And 3, how does the game encourage or reward this? Right now, I don't consider John Wick's question useful at all. John Wick likes to add, how do you make this fun? But fuck that. Fun has no place in game design, in my opinion. Fun is not, you can't design a fun game. That's a whole other thing. But the first 3 questions are really good design questions. What is your game about? How is it about that? And how do you reward people for doing that thing? So Saber Runner finds some problems with the first question, and I really think that this is a misinterpretation of this question. I think that this is a misinterpretation of what the first question is. So the first question, what is your game about? There is no game that is not about something. What I'm saying here is the first question, what is your game about, doesn't mean like emotionally or philosophically or politically, what is your game about? It's not like the question that people ask when they ask about your tattoos. What is the meaning of your tattoo? Like, oh, that's a cool goat skull, but what does it mean? What is it about? I don't think that RPGs being about things is the way that Saber Runner thinks here, because Saber Runner is asking for a generic RPG system, but generic RPG systems are about things too, right? The question here is like, what are you trying to accomplish with your design? What are you trying to do? Why does your game exist? That's what this real question is. Like, what is the deal behind your game here? Like, for example, Dogs in the Vineyard is not a game about Mormon cowboy paladins. It's a game about authority and escalation of authority and the misuse of that authority, right? Dungeons and Dragons isn't about heroic action. It isn't about fantasy adventure. Dungeons and Dragons is about exploring dungeons, getting treasure, and fighting monsters. So when you start to get games that are generic, you have to go looking for something else that they're about instead. Because there's no, ostensibly, there's no setting in the way that we think of settings. There's no theme in the way we think of theme, right? So we have to look at something deeper, something else. And in a game like, for example, I think generic games are about things too. I don't think you can make a game that isn't, it may not be about anything on purpose, and that's kind of a bad design. But for example, Fate is about broad characters and pulpy action. Broad characters and pulpy action. GURPS is a game about attempting to mathematically simulate anything. That's what GURPS is about. Games that are generic on the surface tend to have their like about point buried a little deeper. And so it's about understanding what the game is trying to accomplish in this case. And then the question becomes, then, how is this game about it? How is GURPS a game about simulating anything? In what way is Fate a game about pulp action? Fate is a game about pulp action because ultimately nothing bad ever really happens to the characters. Like, they undergo traumatic experiences, but really just makes them more interesting, right? Like, it's not a game about tragic failure. It's a game about doing the things that your character is defined by and then adding on to those. Even failure just gives you more aspects, right? So there's a certain vibe to the game that comes from its mechanisms. And you can look at the mechanisms and understand how the game is about that pulpy action. So, you know, I think this is really just a misinterpretation about when we say a game is about something. It sounds like Saber Runner does want the game to be about things. They want a game that is about being easy and quick to resolve complication and to have randomization in the game. So that's what your game is about. Even if you don't think your game is about something, it is. You just told me what it's about. So games don't have to have some like deep-seated philosophical underpinning. I tend to prefer when they do, right? I can tell you what every game that I love is about. But the thing is, you're making a promise when you say your game is about something, and you have to use the mechanisms of the game to fulfill that promise. And this is traditionally what I've found so distasteful about Vampire, for example. Historically, Vampire makes a promise. Vampire says, this is a storytelling game about personal horror. I'm on board. That sounds fun. How? How is it like that? Let's dig through the mechanisms. Oh, okay. Well, the mechanisms are a kind of dark superhero game. This isn't what you promised it to be. I think the thing is that you can detect a generic game's what it's about by playing it in a bunch of different settings and situations. Like Nebula Jazz, Atomic Robo, etc. Those games are all based on the Fate engine, and they're all going to feel a little bit the same. You're going to be able to feel like if you watched someone do a campaign of Atomic Robo using Fate, I guarantee it's going to feel a little bit mechanically like Nebula Jazz. I think that's just how it goes. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like there is a defined understanding of what happens in the game. What is this game about is saying, how is the narrative structured by the mechanisms? That's the second question, right? How is it like this, right? So, you know, I think that various games are more or less strict about how they answer that first question. They are broader. Like, obviously, Fate has a very broad application of what it's about. Like, pulp can be applied in a lot of different ways, which is what makes the game feel generic. Whereas Dogs in the Vineyards model, right? Escalation of authority, yeah, you could do it in a bunch of different ways, right? Obviously, Dogs, there's lots of like thin layer hacks on top of it, but they all still feel much closer to that core of what the game is. So yeah, that's, I think, the core thing here is like every game is about something and varyingly aggressively about that. The second question becomes more important. It can be either loosely or very tightly connected to what the game is about. And what the game is about can be loose, it can be mechanical, it can be very deeply thematic, it can be psychological, but it doesn't have to be. It can simply be, this is a game about resolving certain things in the fiction using a specific set of parameters. The narrative of every GURPS game is going to feel the same because the mechanisms don't change, which is, I think, a strength. It's not a weakness. I don't think that that's, I don't like GURPS because I don't like what it's about, but I don't think what it's about is bad, if that makes sense. It's not for me, but I think that if you want to play a bunch of different games that have a simulationist vibe to them, and they're predominantly interested in exploring how do we resolve uncertainty in a deeply mathematical way in game, and then the setting can change, right? We can play GURPS set in the ancient Roman legions. We can play GURPS set in modern day. We can make a GURPS game set in the future, and they're all going to feel comfortably familiar. If you like the way that GURPS plays, if you like what GURPS is about, you did it. You found a game that you like. It just happens that for me, I would rather change the toolbox every time I work on a new project. I would rather have a different game tooled specifically for the thing that I'm trying to do. But that's my preference. That doesn't mean that necessarily these games are bad. I just think that generic games don't work for the kind of RPG that I like to play. I like it when games are about something in the way that Saber Runner thinks this question is asking. I like games that say something philosophically. But that's my preference, right? So I think that the Sorensen 3-question test is really still useful for understanding any game, whether it's generic, in the sense that Saber Runner is discussing here, it's setting agnostic, or whether it's very, very specifically tooled to understand a particular theme. I think the questions still apply. And I think that you can build a game that works and can still answer these questions. So yes, Saber Runner, I think you are missing something, but I hope that this has been clarifying. I don't particularly care for generic RPG systems because I think they're misinterpreted, but I think that they can be applied. If you understand why they are the way they are, I think you can apply them in a good way, right? We chose Fate Accelerated because it made Nebula Jazz what it was. You know, I think if I went back and I did Mirror Shades again, I would definitely have used Fate Accelerated for it. I might have hacked it a little bit, but Mirror Shades and Nebula Jazz, I think they're very close together in terms of their themes and their model. And I think that in that case, we were using the wrong toolbox for that. So yeah, that's the interaction between the 3 questions and generic games, as far as I see it anyway. I'm sure that Jared and Luke and maybe John would have more to say on the thing, because it's their set of questions, not mine. But I hope that as a person who's maybe more accessible to you than they are, I hope that I've helped you understand that a little bit more. So that's our episode. That's it. We did it. That was episode number 72. I hope that it was helpful, useful, or at the very least entertaining. This has been episode number 72 of Office Hours. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, now I got a question from my boy Adam, you can submit it at my website, www.adam-koebel.com. Click the Office Hours link, fill out the question, and I will hopefully get to answer it at a later date. Keep tuning in. It's been a while since we got to do an episode of Office Hours, so I'm glad to be back. Happy to be here dispensing the advice. I will say this: if you are going to be at the Penny Arcade Expo at the beginning of September in Seattle, Washington. I hope that you will attend Office Hours Live. I've got a panel, Office Hours Live. It's in the schedule. I will be answering questions for an hour. I'll just have people come up and ask me GMing questions, and I will answer them. And we'll do it live. I won't know the questions in advance, and we'll just make that happen. PAX is still not great about streaming stuff. I will try to record it myself at the very least, but that may not be possible. We'll see. We'll try. But if you're there, come on out. I'll bring the tweed. I'll dress up. I promise. All right. That's it for us for this episode. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. We will see you next time. Goodbye.